Okay. All right. So let's kind of start off here with just kind of reading a little bit of an intro to the section, and then we'll take a look at what the monthly payment table represents, because then we're going to use that table over in the next couple of problems. All right. So taking a look at the first kind of section, so it's common for businesses, families, individuals to borrow money from a bank or credit union to make large purchases, such as new manufacturing equipment, a new house, or a new car. Just as you invest money to earn interest, lending institutions lend money to you and they collect interest on its use. Okay, so it works both ways, right? Most loans are installment loans or mortgages that involve the borrower making equal, usually monthly payments of a fixed amount, right? So it's equal to a portion of the unpaid principal plus the interest on the unpaid balance. Okay, so that's why at the beginning, because you owe so much, typically that's the part where you have to pay the most interest. Once you owe less, right, then the interest shrinks as well. So that's why I was mentioning that it starts to shift, right? At the beginning, you pay a lot of interest and little to the principal, and then over time, that money shifts to more principal, less interest. Okay, and so the process of repaying the loan is called amortization. Okay, so as you work on problems of the investigation, look for answers to the following questions. Okay, and how can you determine the monthly payment, the unpaid balance, the total cost of a home mortgage or loan, right? So the total cost is how much you are eventually going to pay over the lifetime of your loan. Okay, so let's say you are going to buy a house for, let's say, 300,000. Well, once you add up all the interest that you've paid, you've probably paid closer to maybe 400,000. And that's just kind of unfortunately how it is sometimes. So what functions and technological tools are most useful in analyzing installment purchases with fixed rates involving compounding? Okay. All right. So we're going to probably look at some tools and some functions that help us kind of understand that, maybe some formulas. All right. So the monthly payment table, let me kind of break down what this represents. First, let me read here. So monthly loan or mortgage payments are computed using a formula. Okay. So payment information is often arranged as in the table below to make it easier for lending institutions and realtors to help customers consider options in decision-making on purchases. Note that the table represents principal and interest only. The years column refers to the length of the mortgage loan. Okay, so let's say that you only borrowed $1,000, right? Let's say you only borrowed $1,000 and you planned on paying back that $1,000 at a certain interest rate, and then you get to decide how long you want to pay that money back. Okay, so basically what this shows you is how much you're paying in interest every month for that amount of time. Okay, so let's say you borrowed 1,000, you have an interest rate of 4%. Okay, then the interest over time is going to charge you, let's say for that first column, if you decided to pay this back in 15 years, you would pay $7.40 per month. Okay, if you were going to pay off in 20 years, you would pay $6.06 per month. And if you were going to pay it off in 30 years, you'd pay $4.77 per month. Okay, obviously the higher the interest rate, the more you're paying, right? So as the interest rate goes up, right, you are paying closer to 1075, 965, or 875, right? And so when you think about like, okay, well, why would it be better to maybe pay things off in 15 years if it looks like I have to pay more? Well, that's because you get to pay off what you borrowed much faster, right? So that's one of the big questions when you buy a home is like, do you want to have a lower payment? Typically, if you do, you want to finance it for a longer period of time. It'll help shrink the payment, but you are going to end up paying more interest over the course of those 30 years than if you try to have a loan paid off in 15 years. The payment would be much higher, right? Because you're trying to pay it off in less time, but you're not going to pay as much interest because imagine you're not going to have to pay interest in 15 years worth of payments, right? And so that's kind of where the big question comes in is like, can I afford to do it in 15 years or am I going to have to kind of stick it out for the 30 year? Okay. All right. So that's kind of what we're looking at there. That's what it represents. And so as we go through this, we'll kind of take a look. So that's, again, that's for each $1,000 borrowed, right? If you were to borrow 2,000, then you kind of double the amounts. If you borrow 3,000, you triple the amounts, right? So it's kind of a product of how much money you've borrowed, right? So imagine that for a house, houses today cost 200,000, 300,000, 400,000, 500,000, depending on where you're looking. The price of the house can vary significantly. So what you really want to do is think about, well, if this is how much I would have to pay in interest per month for only $1,000, imagine what you would have to pay for a much more expensive property, right? So you gotta like double, triple, quadruple, depending on how much. Okay. All right. So I have this here copied onto the, and again, this is not something you're gonna need to copy. This is in your book. Okay. So this is more just something we can reference. All right. So now for number one, what we want to do is we want to use the table to calculate the monthly payment on a home mortgage. But again, this is not going to include any property taxes or insurance. So extra thing that when you buy a house, not only do you pay the balance on your house, you pay the interest of your loan, but you also have to pay property taxes to the county or to the city or to the state. Typically, it's the county that collects property taxes, and then insurance, home insurance, right? Just in case something happens to your home, you want to make sure that your house is covered from damage from a fire or from a flood or whatever. Maybe somebody accidentally like crashes into your house, worst case scenario, right? There's different reasons, but you would need to want to have some insurance because the repairs on a home can be pretty expensive. All right, so the question here is, what is the monthly payment on a 30-year home loan, okay, of 110,000 with an APR of 4.5%? Okay, so you've borrowed 110,000 from the bank to be able to buy your home, and you've agreed to pay that $110,000 back to the bank in 30 years. So as a result of that, well, let's find out how much you're going to have to pay in interest every month. Okay, and so give me a second. Let me grab something real quick. Okay, so because we are at an APR of 4.5%, then let's scroll over. Okay, and we have a 30-year home loan. Okay, so that means we are going to be paying. Okay, so we are going to be paying at 4.5%. That's our interest rate for the length of the loan, right? So that interest rate will remain fixed for the entire time. What the good thing is, when you have a fixed loan or fixed rate loan, that's not going to fluctuate. One of the things that happened when the market crashed back in 2008, maybe you were too young to remember, but a lot of what happened at that period in time was that people were kind of being baited into buying a house that they couldn't really afford. So what they would do is that they would sign these contracts, these loan contracts that was a variable rate, which means that the rate could change over time. So at the beginning, the rate was low, right? Maybe the rate started at like 3%, but then maybe after 18 months, then the rate went up to like 6%. And then after another 12 months, it went up to like 9%, right? So it's like when the rate gets that expensive, it pushes people outside of their budgets because now they have to pay all this money in interest. So what was happening was that a lot of people bought these really expensive homes, these really overpriced homes, and they weren't qualified to buy them because they probably didn't have enough income. They maybe didn't have good enough savings. Maybe they didn't have a good enough credit score. So a lot of people were just getting like these home loans very easily, but they weren't qualified for them. So because they weren't qualified for them, then they would be given these kind of like sketchy loans that the banks knew about, but people weren't really aware of what it really meant, right? So then they would just they thought like, okay, well, I can buy a house, right? And so that was good enough news for them, but they didn't really understand how that would affect them. So you definitely want, whenever you get a mortgage, you want the rate to be fixed, meaning that it's not going to change over time. That means you know how much interest you are going to pay every month. It's not going to just suddenly shoot up double the rate and now you have a mortgage payment that's like $600 or $700 more per month. Okay, so that's something to look for whenever you get to that stage in life. Okay, so because it's 44.5% at 30 years, we're looking at this is our monthly payment. Okay, that's our monthly payment. So that's only the monthly payment on $1,000 borrowed, though, right? So if in our case we are borrowing $110,000, okay, well then let's figure out what our payment is going to be, right? Let's figure out what our payment's going to be. So first of all, you want to see how much larger 110,000 is than 1,000, right? Because if it's for every $1,000 borrowed, I have to pay $5.07. Then how much would I have to pay for 110,000? Okay, so here's what we could do. We could set up something as a little bit of a kind of like of a conversion, right? Because it's going to be $5.07, okay, per month, monthly payment, but that's for every $1,000 borrowed. So how many of those $1,000 borrowed have you done in order to borrow 110,000? So then you want to multiply times the product of, well, what is 110,000 divided by 1,000? Okay, and that's going to tell us how many times more or how many times larger 110,000 is than 1,000, and that'll give us our multiplying factor. Okay, so if you don't remember this little trick here, you can cancel out the zeros on the back end, right? So then that's just 110 over 1, which is just 110, right? So then this kind of leaves us with 5.07 times 110, okay? And that's going to give us an idea of what your monthly payment will be if you were to pay the mortgage on a $110,000 home, okay? So let's do the product here, 5.07 times 110. And so what you're looking at is a monthly payment of $557 with 70 cents, right? Which seems like insanely cheap, which it is, right? Because most rent on most apartments today, depending on, when you started renting, a lot of times the rent will jump like really expensive. So a home that costs $110,000, we're probably talking about the late 90s, like 99, 2000 maybe. I think I remember my grandma buying a house around that price in Fontana. So, Fontana obviously not as expensive as it is to live out here in LA. But even now the houses out in that region are close to like 200,000, 300,000, right? That's just because things just get expensive over time anyway. Right. So imagine like making a payment of $557 for your house a month. That's not bad, right? That's not bad. However, it is going to take you 30 years to pay it off. $557 payments. Okay. That is the benefit of being able to get a 30-year mortgage, because if you don't have that much income, you can still afford to buy a house. Obviously, it just depends on how expensive the house is. 5%, but it seems like a bad interest rate. High. I don't know if you guys have been reading or watching the news lately, but interest rates have been lowering. So a lot of people have been looking to try to buy homes because the interest rates are low. And that's one of the key factors is like, what's the price of the house and what's the interest rate? Because the lower the interest rate, the better, right? Because you're going to pay less interest over time. Okay, so it makes the payments more affordable. I think right now, I saw it was like 3.2%, 3.25%, around there. Okay, so it's a much lower percentage of 4.5. It would make a difference on something as big as 110,000. Okay. All right. So that's how we can use this chart. Okay. So this tells us how much your payment is, right? So it's not how much interest you pay, it's just how much in total that you pay. Okay, how much in total that you pay. All right. Now let's assume, okay, so that only tells us a monthly payment. Let's assume now for B. Let's assume for B now that you made a down payment of 30,000 as a condition for the $110,000 loan. Okay, so a down payment is basically what you pay up front. Like you, right before you sign the contract, you're just like, okay, here's what I have right now. I want to put this all towards the house. The reason why that's a good idea is because then it shrinks the size of the loan. So instead of paying repaying 110,000, if you pay 30,000 up front, then you're only going to pay back the remaining amount. In this case, it would be like 80,000, right? So instead of borrowing 110,000, you only borrow 80,000. And what is that going to do for you? It drops the level of the balance of the house. And because you have a lower balance, you are also going to pay less interest. Okay, so there's kind of a big benefit to being able to put a good down payment down. And so people will naturally tell you, like, okay, you want to save a lot at the beginning so you can put the down payment, and then it helps you later on because now your monthly payment is a lot lower. All right, so you made a down payment, right? So now instead of $110,000 loan, right, we have 110,000. You put a down payment of 30,000, so that's gonna reduce the price of what you're gonna have to pay. Okay, so now really you're looking at 80,000. All right. What will be the total amount paid for the home at the end of the 30 years, and how much interest was paid at the end of the mortgage? Okay, so it's a multi-step problem all in one, okay, because they want to know how much are you going to pay at the end of the 30 years. Well, first we need to know how much you're going to be paying month for month, right? Monthly payments. Then we need to know that's so after 30 years. So we know that the mortgage is only going to cost you 80,000, and that means that whatever extra you pay above 80,000, that's it. Okay, so most of the problem only 80,000 that you're going to borrow. All right. So let's find out. Okay, so we know that if it's still at a 4.5%, okay, 4.5% means that you are going to pay the 507 for the every $1,000, okay, for every $1,000. So then we can kind of do a similar conversion to what we did in the previous problem. This time it's only 80,000 divided by 1,000, okay. So when all of these zeros go away, what you're looking at really is 5.07 times 80, right? And then that's going to give us 405 and 6 cents. Okay, so $405 and 60 cents. Sorry, 60 cents. Okay, so that's not bad, right? By putting up all that money up front, it's dropped your monthly payment by almost $150 or so, right? So that's going to help like in the long term, right? Because then at least that's more money that you can save, put in your pocket. You're not sending that to your mortgage, okay? All right. Now, because you know that it's $405.60 per month, you can then calculate, well, how many payments am I going to make over those 30 years? Okay, well, we know that if you have 30 years, you're going to want to multiply that times the 12 months. Okay, that's going to tell us how many months, right? So we're looking at, this is probably going to be 360 months or so. Okay, now on top of that, we want to know how much money you're going to send towards the house in total. So multiply your monthly payment times the number of years, and then for each year there's 12 months in it, right? So if you multiply all this across, this should tell us how much money you're going to pay towards your home. Okay, so we got 405.6 times the 30 years, right? But for each year there was 12 payments to be made. Okay, so in reality what you have sent towards the home is 146,000 with 16. Okay, that's how much money you paid. Okay, so you see your loan was only 80,000, but at a 4.5% annual interest rate for 30 years, you ended up paying 146,000, right? Which is way more than even the value of the house, because the house was only worth 110,000. Does that make sense? So that is where the interest rate, a low interest rate, comes in it becomes very important, because you don't want to be paying an extreme amount of money towards the interest. And in this case, you have, right? Well, at least this person has. Okay. All right. So now that is how much she paid for the loan, right? The loan, she borrowed 80,000. So she had 146,000 that person paid to pay off an $80,000 loan, which seems kind of crazy, right? But that's how the interest is working in this case. All right, how much interest was paid at the end of the mortgage term? Okay, well then in that case, if we want to find out how much interest was paid, if the mortgage was only, or if the loan was only worth 80,000, let's subtract it from everything that was paid, and that should tell us how much interest was paid. Okay, so in this case, we would have 0, 16, 6, and then 14 minus 8 would be 6. Okay, so really what you paid in interest over those 30 years is 66,116. Which seems insane, right? Like you wanted to buy a house and you made such a big down payment to reduce the price, and you still ended up paying 66,000 over those course of 30 years. Now, over the course of 30 years, maybe that doesn't seem like much, because let's say you were to divide those 66,000, and let's say you were going to divide them evenly over the course of 30 years. Well, that's about 2,200 in interest per year. So that doesn't seem so bad when you look at it like that. But eventually, right, that those 30 years, you could have done something with that money, right? That could have been vacations, that could have been whatever, right? So that's the danger of rushing to try to buy a home, maybe when you're not ready, and having to accept a high interest rate. Okay, you don't want to be stuck having to pay that much interest over the course of your lifetime. All right. Okay. Now the other part is how much did this person truly pay for that home? Okay, because remember, this is how much the person borrowed, but that's because they had already put down a down payment of 30,000, right? So not only did they take a loan out for 80,000, and then over the course of that lifetime they paid 146,000 with 16 cents, they have to calculate that down payment, because that down payment still is part of what you paid for the house, right? It's not like you could just say like, oh, ignore this 30,000. So not only did the person pay 146,000 16 cents, I'm sorry, $146,016. Then if you add the down payment back in, this will tell you the true value of what that person paid for this house. So this actually comes out to be 176,000 with 16 cents, right? So a house that only costs 110,000, when you take out a loan for 30 years and you have to pay interest for so long, you pay not double, but close to it, right? Especially on something that, as in today's terms, is not expensive at all. Like $110,000 home would not be considered an expensive home at all. Okay, that would be a really cheap home. You would have a hard time finding a house that inexpensive anywhere in LA County. You would have to maybe go up to like, I don't know. I don't want to throw any county under the bus, but a county that's just not as populated, right? A place where people don't want to live as much. So that's why houses are usually cheaper outside of the city centers. Okay. So that's crazy, right? I mean, I think that's crazy, because I'm thinking about trying to get a house soon. And just looking at this makes me realize, like, wow, that's insane. Okay. All right. Any questions so far? I hope that this is somewhat interesting, because I think it's like fascinating too. All right. Okay, so now let's see here. We did now the scenario switches. Okay, so we found out how much the total amount paid for the home at the end of the 30 years. This would be that, right? So this is total amount paid for the home. Okay, and the amount paid in interest was right here. Right, so you paid 110,000 for your house, and on top of that, another 66,000 just on interest. Okay, all right, but you got a house, right? So not a terrible thing, because then you have the option to sell it or to rent it and to make money from it, right? People do that all the time. Okay, now part C. Part C is asking that suppose the final payment of college loans enables you to reduce the length of the term of a home mortgage. What is the monthly payment on a 15-year mortgage of 110,000 with no down payment and an APR of 4.5%? Sorry, I was reading it from the book. Let me go back. Okay, so I guess this is saying here that you paid off your college loans, right? So because you paid off your college loans, now you have a little more money available to you. You want to try to buy your home, mortgage your home in 15 years, right? But paid off in 15 years. And so what would be the payment? What is the monthly payment on a 15-year mortgage with no down payment, right? So you're gonna take on the full loan, the 110,000. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's go back to the table here. So for scenario C, it is still a 4.5% APR, but you're gonna want to pay this off in 15 years. Okay, so now you're gonna pay a little bit more, right, for every $1,000 borrowed, right? Instead of 507, you're gonna pay 765, which doesn't seem like too much, right? But again, it's for every $1,000 borrowed. So we're gonna have to do a conversion here. So your payment is gonna be not much higher, but it's gonna be higher for sure. Two reasons: because you're gonna pay it off in less time, 15 years instead of 30. The benefit is that you're going to pay interest for half the time, right? Instead of 30 years of interest, you're only paying 15. And just like if you were to divide something by 30 versus dividing it by 15, when you divide it by 15, you're still going to leave a bigger amount left to be paid each month. Okay, so bigger payment, but the bright side is more of that money goes to the principal versus 30 years, smaller payment, but more of that money goes to interest. Okay, so here's what we want to do then. If it's 7.65 for scenario C, right, that's $7.65 for every $1,000 borrowed, but we want to make the conversion because we are borrowing $110,000. So we want to know, well, how many more times is 110 larger than 1,000? Okay, so when these zeros cancel out, okay, you're left with a factor here of 7.65 times 110, okay? And that's gonna help us find what is the monthly payment under that scenario, okay? So 7.65 times 1,000. No, sorry. No, 7.65 times 110. Sorry, I didn't mean to multiply by 1,000. Okay, so your monthly payment now is 841 with 50 cents, which again is not bad, right? Again, this is considering this book was written a while ago, so they was probably using home values at the time that were probably similar to that. So that's probably somebody's rent, right? But imagine being able to have your own home for that same amount of money. Okay, so that's what this person is paying per month. So the next question is, right, so that was just the monthly payment. Okay, good. So let's move on now, because part D is asking, suppose you made a down payment of 30,000 as a condition for the loan. So again, they're going to pay 30,000 up front. Okay, what will be the total amount paid for the home at the end of the 15 years? Okay, so very much a similar process that we did, right? We want to subtract the down payment first, find out how much is going to be borrowed. We know that if we deduct 30,000, we're going to owe 80,000. So then what we want to do is find out how much money is going to be paid over those 15 years, and then we can find out how much interest was it that we paid. Okay, and it should be significantly less, because you have half the time, right? 15 years to 30, half the time is not going to be interest that you're paying. Okay, so let's find out. All right, so for part D, the 110,000, there was a down payment made on that of 30,000. So you have 80,000 that needs to be loaned to you. Okay, that 80,000, well, that's what we're going to take here. We're going to multiply 7.65 times 80,000, because now you're not borrowing the full 110,000, you're only borrowing 80. So then we're going to try to find out, for every $1,000 it's 7.65. So then how much do we have to pay if we're borrowing 80,000, right? So these factors cancel out. What you're looking at here is 7.65 times 80. Okay, so we should probably have a shorter or a smaller monthly payment. 7.65 times 80. And we do, right? Significantly, it's 612 this time. Right, flat. Okay, so then if I'm paying $612 every month, Well, then I want to take 612 times 12 months, right? And then 30 years. And that's going to tell us how much we've paid. I'm sorry, not 30 years. No. This time it's a 15-year loan. Sorry. So it's 15, right? So 12 months times the 15 years will tell us the total number of months times the monthly payment should tell us exactly what we are going to pay for the lifetime of this loan. So 612 times 12 times 15. And then here it looks like this loan ends up costing this person 110,000 and 160. Okay. All right. So the total value of the loan is 110,000. Okay. 110,000. If we want to know how much interest was paid, then we can just simply subtract the 80,000. And that looks like it's 30,160 in interest. Okay. So still a lot, but right, it's about cutting the, it's like almost like cutting the previous one in half, right? You did pay 66,000. You've saved a lot of money over time by choosing to shrink the term of your loan. Okay. All right. So now let's see if that's the case. Okay, if that's the interest, okay, how much was the total value? The total value of everything that you've paid. Okay, well, it's the 30,000 that you paid up front, the down payment, plus all of the money that you had to pay back the loan. Okay, so even though the loan was only 80,000, you had to eventually pay back 110,000. Okay, if we add these two together, we're looking at 140,000 with 160. Okay, and then this would represent total value or total, let me see what I wrote. So the total amount paid for the home. All right. So any questions so far on what we've been doing? Any of the mathematical processes? We okay so far? Okay, so let's just do a quick comparison, because that's what part E wants us to do, is compare your answers to part B and then to part D, right? The only difference between part B and part D was the length of the loan, because in part B, we were asked for a 30-year mortgage versus in part D, it was a 15-year mortgage. It was still the same down payment in both cases. And the APR was the same because they didn't tell us to change it. So we were working under the assumption that the APR was 4.5, right? So the difference is, well, let's break it up this way, okay? With a 30-year, $80,000 loan at 4.5% APR versus a 15-year, $80,000 loan at 4.5%. Okay, we can at least compare the interest paid, right? So at a 30-year, the interest paid was 66,000. Let me get the correct value here. 66,000 with 16. Meanwhile, at 30-year, it was 30,000 with 160. Okay. The difference in interest paid here, let's find out. 66,000 with 16 minus 33. Okay, we're looking at a difference of 32,000. I'm sorry, I typed in the wrong thing. 66 with 16 minus 30 with 160. Okay, it's $35,000 and 856. Okay, so there is a difference of $35,856 worth of interest that you would not pay if you chose to do a 15-year loan, right? Under the assumption that you've put 30,000 as a down payment. All right. So those are the comparisons that are definitely worth doing whenever you get to the point in your life where you feel like you're ready to buy a home. Sometimes you would have a bigger payment, right, for 15 years, but you're going to pay off, not only are you going to pay off your house much faster, you're going to pay a lot less in interest. Right now, this is an example of something that is not very practical. No, I like the problem, but then I don't, because 110,000 is not something that you're going to be able to buy a house for anywhere in Southern California, right? That's just not realistic. Most likely, something that's more realistic is probably somewhere in the 400,000s, right? That seems more normal to me. So now just imagine what a payment would be, right? This is kind of like an extra thing, but it's more for us, more to be more realistic. Okay. If let's say, right, let's just give ourselves the benefit of the doubt here that we would qualify for the best interest rate that they have to offer, which is 4%. Let's just say that that's where we are at. We're at a 4%. I want to see, okay, what would it look like if I wanted to pay a house off in 30 years, right? Because, you know, let's just use that scenario for now. But let's say that the price of the home is let's say it's 400,000 instead, right? So it's 4.77. And again, this is just me being curious. 4.77, but you're buying a home, and let's say that the house was 420,000 and you put 20,000 as a down payment, right? Let's just say that. So what you're really doing is you're financing, you're going to borrow 400,000. Okay, but you divide that by 1,000. So okay, what you're looking at here is a payment of 4.77 times 400. This is your monthly payment. Okay, so a monthly payment is 1,908. Okay, that right there seems a little bit more realistic. And again, that's the 30-year loan, right? You're paying 477 a month for every $1,000. So on a $400,000 loan, it's 1,908 on a 30-year mortgage, right? So imagine paying $2,000 a month, basically, every month for 30 years. All right, maybe that's not too bad, right? A lot of rents charge that, and when you rent, you don't even have the option to buy what you're renting, right? It's because somebody else owns it, and you're just kind of there until you decide not to rent that place anymore. Okay, now imagine making that payment. Now remember, this doesn't include property tax, and this does not include insurance, right? So this is literally just the mortgage plus the interest, and there's going to be additional costs to that. All right, now this is the 30-year version. Now let's say you wanted to try to eliminate the amount of interest you're going to pay over the course of the lifetime of this, right? Then we would have to look at a different value. right? Again, this is assuming that we have the best interest rate that they have to offer. So then instead, we're going to use $7.40 instead for 15 years. Okay, but again, it's the same factor. It's the 400,000 that you've borrowed, and you want to divide that by 1,000. So the 740 times 400, right? If you want to pay off that $400 house in 15 years instead, right? Let's say you have the means to do it. It's a pretty steep increase, right? Now you're looking at close to 3,000 a month, right? Only going to your house. Let's say 2960. Okay, so at 2960, right? Imagine, okay, well, if I have to pay that much just to my house, well, then how much would I even have left to pay for other things, right? Car, groceries, gas, utilities, right? Money that you're gonna save, you're gonna put in savings to save for vacations, things like that. So those are the things that you want to think about, and that's the little bit more realistic kind of number in that sense. So that's typically how it goes. Okay. And now again, 4.4%. Again, that's high. 4% is high for an interest rate. Like I said, a lot of things right now they've been below 4. They've been 3 point something, right? So it's a good time if you do have a down payment, right? If you have money for a down payment, it can be a good time. Now again, this is like a general thing. Like this isn't a hard and fast rule. The 4.77 or the 740. It just kind of depends, right? This is something that depends on the bank, right? Each bank will lend you at different rates, but the banks are usually trying to compete with each other, so they're going to try to keep the rates as low as possible. So you can imagine what was happening to people in the housing crisis when they went from a 4%, then all of a sudden to like 7.5%, then 10%, right? Just imagine what happened to their monthly payments if they were already like at the top of their budget, right? Like they were already like, man, I can barely afford this house as it is. And then suddenly, you know, the crisis happens because a lot of people started to default on the loans, right? So they defaulted on their own loans. The banks had a mess with a bunch of loans that money wasn't getting paid back to. So the banks were losing money. And then eventually the entire financial system collapsed, right? But a lot of that was people trying to make money off of a situation, kind of taking advantage of hardworking middle class people who just wanted to buy a house. And so they got them into like these shaky, shifty loans, right? But one thing to remember is as you move through life, you are looking for a fixed APR. Okay, fixed means that it's not going to move, right? It's fixed in place. So you will have a loan with this percent for the entire lifetime of your loan. Okay. All right, so that's pretty much it for today. I think it was a good little introduction problem to all of this. I think it gave us a chance to talk about quite a lot: down payments, interest rates, and a little bit something more realistic. So maybe next time what we can do is, what I'd like for you guys to do is like search online, like look for a house maybe that is in a neighborhood that you like. Maybe you find a house that you like, right? Something to be like, yeah, I could see myself living in this. And let's do the math on it. Let's actually try to find out like how much you would have to pay per month if you wanted to buy it. Right? I think that could be cool, right? So that way we do something a little bit different and not just like bookwork. So let's go ahead and do that. So for Tuesday, just look something up online, take a screenshot, make sure that it has the price, right? It has the listed price of the house, and then we'll just kind of, maybe you can send it to me through email, and then I can just post it, and we can just do the math on it, and we can find out like, is our calculation similar to what the website says that the monthly payment might be? Because a lot of times those real estate websites will tell you like, this is the projected monthly payment, right? And so you put in information and it has like a built-in calculator. So we'll just try to compare, right? How close is this table that was made back in whenever this book was made, right? We'll see how close it is to giving us real information. All right. Sound good? Can I count on you guys to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. I'll find a house too. I'll find something in like Beverly Hills.
Or should I do the what was it? The $3,000 rent?
$3,000 rent. That's crazy, man. All right. All right, guys. Well, then I'll see you guys next week.